So you want a private equity role? Here's what Kit Lisle says it really takes.
It really depends on the role. So they want people that can play well in that environment.
But if EQ gets you in the door, red flags can kick you right out. What are the red flags that will indicate right off the bat?
Let's just start with the real easy one, where everything is just really weird in private equity.
And here's the kicker. These roles aren't found on job boards. I have one question as it relates to hireability and skills, because we're hearing so much noise about AI. And what you're really saying is,
So I've spent almost 30 years now in the private equity ecosystem.
how do people get these PE opportunities?
They'll say, you need to talk to that guy.
That's the real playbook for getting hired in private equity. Hear the full truth on this week's Career Blast and a Half.
The idea of job security is outdated as a landline. If you haven't been in a search for a while, it's probable you will at some point, by choice or not. Most executives admit to staying way too long, or sense what's coming and justify staying anyway. There's another reason. The faulty belief that navigating to what's next will inevitably be worse and has to suck. Screw that. Lauren Greif has spent a lifetime in corporate and executive search, calling bullshit on stale career advice that most still use. This is Career Blast in a Half, the career podcast for executives ready to cut past outdated career advice to fuel your outcomes now. So let's go.
All right. So I am so happy because I got to say, when you meet Kit Lisle, you're going to be thinking to yourself, this is not your everyday M&A strategist. He is not only battle-tested in his field, he's also battle-tested because he's a former U.S. military intelligence officer, and he even served at the Pentagon and was also a desk officer at the Joint Chief of Staff. So just imagine swapping battlefield maps for market maps. And that's what he does. That's exactly what he did. And he carved out a really stunning niche in the complex and fast-paced world of PE, private equity. So he's also the son of a retired colonel. So strategy is practically embedded in his DNA and his blood type. I can promise you that. This guy is all in.
Well, I was wondering what was coming.
Yeah, today.
That was pretty good.
Right?
Wow.
Thank you. Today, he's the founder of TheOperators.pe, a peer community and marketplace designed for exclusively PE-backed executives. So they are the unsung heroes of PE firms, affectionately called, air quotes, operators. He also leads Accelera Growth Partners, a growth strategy firm that also specializes in mid-market M&A. So I think we've established that this reputation is really all about clarity from chaos. And that's really what Kit's expertise is. And what he's here to talk to us about today is something that I think is not only valuable, but I think is invaluable, because there's a lot of beliefs, maybe myths around what PE jobs are about. And we're going to talk about the high stakes, the hidden rules, and the hard lessons. So, after all that, Kit.
That was pretty good. I'm impressed. You did your diligence. I mean, you even made me sound like more credible than I probably really am. So that was awesome. Well done.
I had a high bar to hit, so I'm glad I made the cut.
Oh, well, I got it. You talked about the bar. I've got to tell a quick story. Do you mind?
Go for it.
This is gonna be a little bit of a sidetrack, but we've probably got time. So one of the nicest compliments anybody ever paid to me was, I think in 11th grade, I was a pole vaulter on our track team. We had no pole vaulting coach per se, so we were all sort of self-taught. And I won the meet that particular day. And the judge came up to me afterwards and he said, "Son, I've never seen any pole vaulter get so high with so little talent and skill. And that just goes to show what pure determination can do for you. That'll take you places. I've always
Absolutely.
remembered that.
I love that. And I'm a big fan of grit, which of course is Angela Duckworth's area of knowledge. But for today, what I would love to go into is the world of PE. And what got me thinking, and some of the questions that I started noodling on were, if PE backed operators are the top performers in your ecosystem, why do they feel so alone and so disconnected from their peers who truly get the pressure that they're under?
Yeah. Well, we should probably start with a couple of acknowledgments.
Yes.
Number one, if the private equity backed executives are the superstars or professional athletes of the business world, then we do have to give a little bit of acknowledgement to operating partners. So the role of the operating partner has grown significantly in the last decade or so. And they're sort of the internal experts or consultants who are intended to serve, but really to help coach, advise, mentor the operators. And in some cases, it makes the life of the operator, the CEO or CFO or whomever, more difficult, more challenging because they've got one more person that they have to report to. But generally speaking, those operating partners are there to help. So that's the first thing. Then the second thing is everybody experiences private equity culture shock. I mean, it could be your fifth instance or your first. It doesn't matter. And private equity culture shock comes about for three different reasons. Number one, if you were recruited to join a private equity backed company from whatever, M&M Mars or Dell Computers or, pick your big GE, your big favorite company, your expectation is that things like processes, systems, behaviors, people are going to be kind of like they were at Microsoft. Well, guess what? They're probably not. But you don't have any reason to believe that until you get there and say, wait a second, what? I agreed to double the EBITDA of this business in 4 years, but I don't have like a support system. I don't have resources. This is going to be really challenging. And so that culture shock leads to something else. We'll get to that in a second. The second form of private equity culture shock is the founder. So if you're the founder of a business, then chances are the private equity group that's courting you is going to say things or maybe not say things so that you believe you'll kind of continue business as usual. There's not really going to be that much change and you'll still kind of sort of be in charge. Well, guess what? You're not. Whoever has more than 50% of the business gets to call the shots. And so the founder often really scratches their head in realizing all of these changes that are taking place here are essentially, what's the right word, throwing the baby out with the bathwater or discounting all the decisions that I've made in all these years. And so that can be a whirlwind of like culture shock as well for those founders that stay on. And then the third type are the incumbents. So if you were, let's say, the chief operating officer of a family-run business that got acquired by private equity and you woke up one day and you're reporting to a PE board, you're going to hear acronyms and vernacular and expressions and expectations and reporting expectations and governance and decision rights and so on and so forth that you've never experienced before. So you may be at the peak of your career and have been very successful to that point, but all of a sudden I remember one guy saying, hey, I just got out of a 45-minute meeting with two 20-somethings. I took notes, I nodded, I smiled. And for 45 minutes, I had absolutely no idea what they were saying. So that's culture shock. We'll pause there.
Whew. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted, not because of you, because of all the transition pieces and maybe feeling like you're swimming without your fins, right? And you just don't know exactly where you're going. And so with all this in mind, right? With all this in mind, what you've laid out, why does everyone want that PE stamp? Why is it like the grail?
Yeah. Well, at least two thoughts come to mind, probably three. So let's start with the acknowledgement that, the very first thing I said was that they are the professional athletes of the business world. And so it's well recognized that if you can perform well in a private equity backed environment, or if you can last through a liquidity event, which is really the test. Like if you survive a liquidity event, then that's your check mark or your stamp of approval or what have you. Then, you're that much more attractive either to other private equity groups or to, other business people, because generally speaking, people recognize how demanding and challenging and how much pressure there is on people who are private equity backed. So number one, just stamp of approval. Number two, let's face it, there's a lot of money in it. So if you're private equity backed, then there's really good evidence that if you do survive the liquidity event, then you'll experience some financial benefits. And then the third is there are a lot of people who have worked in a public company environment, they've worked in a small family environment, and they realize that they're a little bit ADD maybe, and they don't have the patience, or they don't really like to be perfectionists. They really want to just make a decision at the 80% level of confidence and move on. And that is really they would be well suited for a private equity environment. And maybe they just recognize that's the right environment for them. They just love that adrenaline rush. And it's like a 3-year sprint or a 4-year sprint. And you're going to be working hard for 4 years. And then, okay, there's going to be some time off, because typically when you define success, you've gotten the business sold. And then there's a period of career transition. So you can relax and recuperate and then, find your next opportunity from there.
Exactly.
Right.
So with this in mind, and being in your situation and seeing this on a day-to-day basis, when a PE firm is sizing up their talent, right? What are the signals, whether they be loud or subtle, that say to them, this operator, this is the person who can make us money fast?
It really depends on the role. So, if we think about it from a CEO standpoint, the answer is going to be a little bit different from a CFO and so on and so forth. But, they don't necessarily. So, and then there are other ways to think about it as well. So first time private equity backed, they're looking for a CEO who kind of fits one bill. Those that are maybe they're investing in a company that's been backed by private equity 3 previous times, the level of expectations and kind of what they're looking for in a CEO might be a little bit different. So, generally speaking, I'll just sort of give you the lowest common denominator answer here. And it may be a little bit surprising. They're looking for operators that have high EQ, that collaborate well in board meetings, that don't come into board meetings expecting that they're going to get approval. It's basically, in some scenarios, in some ecosystems, a board meeting is basically, check the box, or it's approve, disapprove. But in a private equity backed environment, you're sort of pre-socializing what the board meeting is going to be about. And then you get into the board meeting and it's more conversation, collaboration, interaction. Kind of everybody's kind of weighing in on how to make this decision or series of decisions. And so they want people that can play well in that environment. So, that's probably a little bit surprising, but, high EQ, low ego, excellent communicators, people who ask, people that like input, advice, feedback. You're going to have people that are really in the weeds of your business. So some CEOs just can't handle that. So they want people that are, I think, a priority placed on speed, decision-making. As I said earlier, it doesn't have to be perfect, acknowledging mistakes and saying, okay, we recognize that we need to pivot, which is an acknowledgement that we went down the wrong path. However, we now have more data. We now have more time. We have more experience, and therefore we're going down this path. We learned our lesson. It won't happen again, that sort of thing. So there's some people who are less well-equipped personality-wise to serve in a private equity environment than others.
So
did that answer your question? I'm not sure if that
sure did.
made sense.
It sure did. I am surprised that EQ is at such a high value, not because it's not a valuable skill, but even my thinking was more in line with quants or people who are, super analytical, high speed to market kind of mentality, and those who are also very equipped to deal with fast-paced money-making decisions. So
fast-paced money-making decisions. That's right. So I'll just add a little bit more to that, because you're right. The most important role for a private equity investor, one could argue, is not the CEO, but rather the CFO. And the reason for that is the CFO is the eyes and ears of the private equity group. They speak the same language, they think the same way, they've had the same background and career and so on and so forth. So for the CFO, a private equity group, backing myself up a little bit, might not use terms like EQ because that sounds a
Right.
little too soft and
It's
squishy and,
too, yeah,
a
it's
little too
too low.
cultural.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they might say, look, we want people that can get along with us and, appreciate our opinion and perspective and can listen and ask us questions well. So they may not say the term, but they're thinking along the same lines. And then something else is talent magnets. Even a CFO, they're looking for a CFO who is able to bring along a head of FP&A and, other VPs of finance that they've worked with before that are really good and skilled and capable. So regardless of position, I think decisiveness, talent magnets, an owner's mindset, a willingness to make decisions quickly, recognizing that maybe that's not perfection. Yeah. So
I love this term that you're using, talent magnet, because so often I am curious about this too, right? So often I'm out here saying, build your LinkedIn, build your community, build other relationships outside of your immediate vertical, not just because it can expand opportunities, but also because other decision makers are trying to understand who you are connected with, because eventually, as you get hired, they'll want you to be sourcing talent for them. And so I'm just curious, like, what role does LinkedIn start to build either positive or negative perceptions as somebody that hangs on or is committed to the traits that you have, that you've just outlined?
well, I think LinkedIn is critical. Somebody did a survey and determined that 98% of private equity hiring decision makers, whether they're executive recruiters or talent leaders in private equity, leverage LinkedIn. So ubiquitous, it's essential. And, thinking about that term talent magnet, they want people like if they're really focused on, typically the way it works, they buy a company, they bring in their own CEO and CFO. And in a perfect world, those two have already worked well together previously. But typically, they'll just turn to the CEO and say, okay, source your own team, whomever you want, right? And the CEO might have a chief operating officer, a chief marketing officer, but maybe not a CTO or maybe not a CHRO. And so they may stick with the person that's been there, the incumbent. But I think the important thing is, you're right. When you're evaluating talent and you're looking at their LinkedIn profile, you're looking at, okay, who's this person connected to? And how could this help us? And, are there a lot of people that that used to work for this person whom he's connected to, or have they maybe alienated people that they used to work with? So yeah, it's a good test.
So I love how you describe the athletes and this. My husband and I always joke, are you an athlete or are you athletic? So if you've been on a team sport, in his eyes, you're essentially an athlete. And so with all this being said and looking for this prototype or this, target of people that do that, let's be blunt, right? What are the red flags that will indicate right off the bat that an executive is going to get scratched off the list? Because as much as I want to share what it is that is in demand, I want to also be clear about what's not.
Yeah. So again, we have to think about it from a role standpoint, and then maybe to some extent from a, all right, is this the first time private equity backed, in which case the bar is a little lower, or is it the fifth time that the company has been owned by private equity where the bar is much higher? But, let's just start with the real easy one, which is CFO. And I had an awkward conversation with a CFO from a big, well-known public company, and he'd also worked in multinational private companies. And his comment to me was, I've been told that I wouldn't qualify to be a CFO in a private equity backed environment. And that's ridiculous, because if you've been a CFO in a private company and you've been a CFO in a public company, then you can certainly be a CFO in a private equity backed environment. And I said, well, I'm not going to say the chances of that happening are zero, but they're really, really small. And the reason is they want people that have already been in the seat, the CFO seat, previously, or at least worked in a private equity backed environment and sort of worked their way up from a VP level or something else, right? So the CFO role is unique in that sense because you can't just enter from the outside and think, oh, this is just like public accounting or whatever. It's not. It's totally different. The expectations, the timelines, the reporting, the board meeting structure, everything is just really weird in private equity. So for CFOs, it's bad news. For others, I would say generally as a rule of thumb, operators that come in with really strong industry knowledge and awareness of ways to grow the business, awareness of the value creation levers, in other words, in a private equity context, it's really all about creating value. So you're reducing risk, you're increasing investments that a future buyer won't have to make. So they're wise investments, reducing risk, and ultimately increasing what the multiple will be when a buyer pays for the business. So if the CEO or some other C-level executive has experience in the industry, they understand value creation, but they're either very arrogant, love the sound of their own voice, don't really, maybe talk on top of people, don't really respect what the future board is going to say, says, I got this, I don't really want to collaborate with you on this. Those are really big red flags. So even though they've got the industry knowledge and value creation expertise, those personality traits might end that C-level executive's chances right there.
I am blowing the lid off of our best kept secret, our 30-day blast program. Yeah, you heard it. 30 days. We have seen so much success for this program that past clients have landed in that 30 days and increased their compensation 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, over 100%. Now, not everybody lands and earns that much in 30 days, but my point is it prepares you. And in 30 days, if you're not out of there with a changed mindset and changed, clear and simple ways to be able to navigate the market this year, then we'll gladly refund your misery and you can go back to applying now. Check out the link below for the next 30-day blast, and we would love to have you there because we live for your success, and that's what's really important. See you then. So I have one question as it relates to hireability and skills. How much emphasis are executives with AI chops? I'm not even going to say expertise because I don't think anybody really, I don't work for Meta and I'm not making $200 million. But my point is, how much weight does AI give to a candidate in a PE or operator role?
I think at this point, 2025, it's helpful, it's interesting, it's certainly worthy of discussion. I don't think it's going to make or break anything because at the end of the day, today, it's like, well, that's so important that we may need to just outsource that to a third party anyway. But, if you bring it in, maybe it's additive, but it's not going to make up for a weakness on the, interpersonal front or something like that.
Good. So it's not a knockout, right? It's not like, oh, you don't have this. Not at all.
Not at all.
And that's important because we're hearing so much noise about AI. And what you're really saying is, hey, great, good, you should, because it's important to be relevant, but it's not necessarily a deal maker or breaker. So
that's my sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that may be different next year, right?
It may be different next year. And so again, always being a student of the market, that's what I call myself too, is so important because you're never done learning, and there's never, an ill opportune time to dig a little deeper. So what I'm also asking, and I'm raising my hand and asking this on behalf of job seekers, what is the one question that you would suggest absolutely needs to be asked when you are, maybe you've been plucked, maybe, somebody recommended you, somehow, some way you are now in, maybe this is your first time working for a PE firm and you don't necessarily have a lay of the land that you would in other environments. What is the one question that is essential for that candidate to ask in this PE firm?
In an interview setting or pre-interview?
Either one, even pre-interview to vet, because time is expensive. And when you're in the job search, and you know this, right? You don't want to be, shooting a lot of blanks. You want to really have some level of confidence and traction. So how do you vet?
Sure. So I've spent almost 30 years now in the private equity ecosystem, and I don't think that anyone would have a problem with what I'm about to say, although it is kind of extreme. I would say 80% of those people who work inside private equity funds as GPs, general partners, are not pleasant people to work for or work with. 80%. They're just tough, demanding. They're on top of you. They're type A to the max, extremely intelligent, extremely hardworking, and they expect that and more of their operators. Management teams that don't work out or not performing or not meeting their numbers, the response that you'll get is, well, if this management team can't cut it, we'll get rid of them and we'll bring in a management team that can. We'll bring in an operator, a real operator, right? And so it's just very black and white to them. It's like human capital, not as dry powder, which is like access to an ability to raise the bar, but rather human capital as a commodity that, you just plug and play, remove, replace. So, I think the first question to ask is to do your own competitive intelligence on the private equity group or the partner or partners that you'd be interacting with to just get a sense, is this a good person to work for? One of the most common questions in our platform, in our online community platform called TheOperators.pe, that's asked is, hey, I've got an interview opportunity with XYZ Capital Partners. Good people to work for, or should I even bother with the interview? Question mark, right? And then you get 6 or 7 people weighing in. And that's really extremely valuable to that person who's considering an interview, because if 5 out of 6 people say, hey, I'd run the other way, then they're not going to waste their time in the interview and not going to get their hopes up. So I think one of the services that our community is providing, frankly, is the ability to screen for that and then help private. Maybe in a roundabout long-term way, we're helping private equity groups realize that when you treat people poorly, you the quality of talent that wants to come to you maybe is proportionate. I hope all that made sense, Lauren.
It makes perfect sense. You have, and this is actually a perfect partner to what I'm about to ask, but you have the inside scoop. You're not going to find out about it, on a job board. You might hear some intel, but always, always better to hear it from people who have firsthand experience, right? Or have been around for long enough to know, run, don't walk, and save yourself time and heartache and broken expectation. So I love that you are doing this. And that also leads me into the next question, which is, how do people get these PE opportunities? Because so much of the work that we do through Portfolio Rocket, and also that I advocate all the time on LinkedIn, is to get off those damn job boards. Not because they're the boogie thing, but because most of the activity at this level, or probably in your vertical too, is not happening on Indeed.
Absolutely. 100%. So I wouldn't even waste time with those job board sorts of things. C-level opportunities in a private equity backed environment happen only because someone has developed a relationship with you. Recruiters are potentially going to find you, but they'll find you in part because of your personal brand. Your personal brand is reflected in what you say on LinkedIn, what you say in, a podcast, what you say in a white paper, or maybe you have a personal website even. But your personal brand statement is really where it all begins. And that the purpose of that personal brand statement and how you think about yourself and what your, I don't know, I hesitate to use the term superpower, but what skill you bring to the table is intended to enable the hero of the story, who is not yourself, by the way, to succeed, right? So what is the toolkit that you bring that will enable somebody with a problem to solve that problem and become the hero because they hired you, right? So that happens because of the relationships that you've been able to develop with other people who might say, you know what, this is not really a fit for me, but I know somebody. Or somebody might say, we've got this opportunity and it's perfect for what is her name? I met her at a conference. She came into our office one time and she's emailed me like every single month for like 6 months, but she would be perfect. Let me just go back and find, oh, it's Lauren. Oh, great. So that's the way people get jobs in private equity. It's who you know. It's how they know you. It's how they branded you. You know, you don't brand yourself. You can influence the way people think about you or what they say about you when you're not in the room by what you write and what you say, but you're not putting the brand, the stamp on yourself. So you have to think about, what would people say about me when I'm not in the room? And that's really how people get jobs in private equity, is they'll say, hey, you need to talk to that guy.
100%. And I think that even though we are talking PE, I really do believe that that is one of the key catalysts that has more magic, more power, and more resonance over time than anything else, because a keyword can change and fade in the heartbeat. So I always will advocate for building something that lasts. Speaking of lasting, I got to ask you this question, right? And I think this is also true in any job, but especially in private equity. The second you get hired, the clock starts ticking, right? It's like all of a sudden, it's go time. So how do executives accelerate these intangibles like trust and a more tangible like ROI fast, maybe within the first 30, 60, or 90 days?
Yeah, I was on a podcast for somebody that it was a former military, I don't know, veterans podcast or something, and we were talking about private equity. And I'm an Army guy, so there's a little bit of pain in sharing this story. But I give the analogy of a SEAL team that's on a helicopter over the ocean, and when they're jumping into the ocean, they know it's going to be cold, they know it's going to be uncomfortable, it's going to be dark, they've got a long swim ahead of them. And, the tendency is to come up for air and like look around and be like, I'm okay. Are you okay? And yeah, you got to do that, but you've got to start swimming really fast. Like, you've got a difficult mission ahead of you. You've got to start going. And it's exactly the same thing in a private equity backed environment. Like, it's nice to like start a job by asking a lot of questions and go on a listening tour and have a lot of town halls and interview everybody and let everybody to meet you. And, that's great. Do it. But at the same time, you have to be starting on the process of creating value. Value creation starts with the word alignment. So getting everybody on the same page, seeing things the same way, communicating effectively, understanding who has the ability to make what decision, understanding what the expectations of the board are, setting the tone. All of that sort of stuff has to happen. And you can't really effectively just bolt on systems, processes, technology, and analytics and just be like, okay, I'm done.
Right.
It's a difficult job. So you've got all the alignment stuff to do, but at the same time, you've got to start creating tangible value. I hope that made sense.
It sure does. And I appreciate that you are also like, this is, a really tough needle to thread, because you have to have the alignment, but you also need to be execute, get it done now. And so I think that it's probably best applied with what you talked about earlier. A lot of the ability to have strong emotional intelligence, to read the room, to be able to read other people based off of what you've learned, what you're witnessing, and just the culture at large. So I'm really glad that you basically said, you know what, it's time to woman up or man up and get the show on the road, because that's what it is, right?
And we started the conversation now by talking about private equity culture shock. And I said, there's more to the story, and we'll get to that. So I want to make sure that we get to the story. So, it's typical to experience some degree of culture shock. As I mentioned earlier, whether you're the founder, the incumbent, or you were recruited in, if you're a C-level executive, chances are at some point there's going to be a little bit of, oh, wow, I didn't expect that, right? Whoa. But what comes next is a little bit of imposter syndrome. And if we think about the word or the definition of imposter syndrome, it is the feeling or the sense that despite all evidence to the contrary, which is the important part, despite all evidence to the contrary, I may not be qualified for this job. So it happens to everybody, and sooner or later, or almost everybody in private equity, you start to second guess yourself and say, But the reason it happens is because you got yourself into something that you thought was doable. And maybe you just weren't aware of all the dynamics that you were going to be facing. So for example, you assumed that you'd be able to make all the decisions if you were the founder, or you assumed that things would be pretty much the way they used to be when Bill owned the company if you were the incumbent, or you assumed that, hey, I'll have access to people, processes, systems, technology, just like I did at Microsoft. Well, guess what? It's a small company. So no. And then it's just, oh no, I feel I'm on the hook now. So it's lonely at the top, but you've also got those other two factors in private equity.
I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to tell us about your company, TheOperators.pe, and who are the types of people that are really successful when working with you. And if it's different from what you've just described earlier in the show with all the other, traits and intangibles, or are you actively seeking people who come by referral, have these strong brands on LinkedIn? Like, which of these are kind of your telltale signs that this would be a great person for you and your company to back?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question. I appreciate it. So I'll start with what makes people successful in the community and the platform. The people that have had the most positive experiences are the ones that proactively network. So we have a really easy tool. Like if you're looking to network with operating partners, you can sort operating partner by industry, by EBITDA range, by number of prior experiences, by geography, et cetera. And you can do the same thing for any role that you'd like. You can sort in probably 20 different ways. So that makes it really easy to connect with people. And we even have a filter for networking mindset. So if you say, hey, I'm really focused on my job right now, I don't want to be networking, you can indicate that. But if you're open to networking, then that shows up as well. So that makes it very convenient for those people who want to network. But we also have discussion groups, and then we have a forum for people to post questions and post answers and best practices and playbooks, templates, and so forth. You misspoke a little bit. I didn't correct you at the time, but I'll correct you now. It's okay. So it's not 100% private equity backed executives. So an example is we had somebody who was referred in with zero prior private equity experience, but he was the CEO of a very large, well-known retail chain that you would recognize. And I thought it would be doing a disservice to the community if we didn't bring this person and his experience into the community. So even though he doesn't have prior private equity experience, he's really relevant to the community. So there are those sorts of exceptions. In many cases, we get introductions. So one member will say, hey, I really vouch for this person. I really think they'd be a good addition to the community. And if that happens, then we overlook something like maybe they did not have prior private equity experience, or maybe they never worked at the C level. Those are generally speaking the cutoffs. You have to be C level, and you have to have experience in private equity, but there are those exceptions, as I mentioned. So let's see. I think there was another part to the question, and I'm not sure what it was, but maybe we addressed it.
So you're getting obviously referrals, and that sounds like the majority of how you are building this community. Any other places where you are sourcing, said candidates? Are they better that they are passive or active in in a previous role? Help us understand what that person might look like if you are listening to this and thinking, oh my goodness, I might be a candidate or not.
Yeah, I mean, if you are private equity backed and you have worked at the C level, then you're qualified, and you could just go to TheOperators.pe and you'll find your way. If there's a little bit of a question mark, then feel free to reach out. Kit@TheOperators.pe is my email address. So most of the members do come about through word of mouth or referrals. I do a lot of speaking with the Financial Executives Networking Group, FENG. I've spoken at the Private Directors Association, and then Executive Forum, EF, has brought a lot of our members as well. So those kinds of speaking venues tend to bring new members. I do some LinkedIn outreach, and that helps. But
I want to thank you. I want to thank you, first of all, because we were connected through another mutual friend, and that's how word of mouth, right? That's how we got together. And I am so appreciative of what you are doing by way of educating me, educating my audience, and keeping the real deal available to all of us, because I think you always need to have an important insider perspective before you start imagining or assuming or even just putting yourself at risk for something that may or may not necessarily, be what you signed up for. So if you're an athlete,
Yeah.
you're training every single day. And if you're an athlete, you're not just doing what you're doing at your workout. You're doing it based off of your sleep, you're doing it based off of your nutrition and so many other things. And I think you've made an excellent, excellent case for what this, breed of human beings is all about. And I'm so grateful to you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Lauren.
Of course. So, listener, this was a juicy episode, super juicy. I hope you had your notes ready. And if you didn't, of course, you can just go back and listen again. Please don't forget, follow Kit on LinkedIn, Kit Lisle. You'll have his link in the show notes. I'll also include TheOperators.pe. So there'll be that link there. Separately, I just want to thank you always, 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 always for listening. And thank you for all of the awesome reviews from Apple Podcasts. I cannot thank you enough. The podcast is growing. Our goal is to get to 200 reviews by the end of the year. And we're at like 153 if my math is correct. So thank you again and look forward to having you at the next episode.
Thank you for joining today. We appreciate your listening ears. Big time. We ask this: use these tools, not tomorrow, right now, and share them by spreading the love, leaving us a rating and subscribe so you don't miss the next career blast in a half. Most of all, thank you for you.